Does fruit have a place in a low carbohydrate diet? Like all foods, there are some pros and cons to eating fruit. It's loaded with vital nutrients, antioxidants, and fiber, but it's also filled with sugar, both in the forms of glucose and fructose. This is what makes fruit so unique and a bit challenging. Hey, if you're new here, I'm Andrea, holistic nutritionist, helping women restore metabolic flexibility and cellular health through rebalancing insulin sensitivity, gut health, and proper detox pathways. In today's video, we are talking all about fruit and why we need to treat it a little bit differently. There are a lot of misconceptions around fruit. First, that it's not a typical carbohydrate. It's sometimes considered healthier because it's natural sugars and it's not processed like many grains are. Since it's natural sugar, somehow that means it's better. Well, that's true and not true at the same time. In the end, sugar is sugar. Now, I will completely agree that a whole piece of fruit is way better than some candy or processed sugar, but when we're comparing just the sugar component and its effects on blood sugar, glucose is glucose and fructose is fructose. It's, again, the same molecule. The other complexity to fruit is that it's really high in fructose. Fructose comes with its own set of misconceptions. Many will say that it's healthier because it doesn't cause a spike in blood sugar. The body cannot use fructose in its original form, so while that one piece is true, has a lot of other downsides that we will dig into. So let's look a little bit at how our bodies handle these two types of sugar. Glucose is used by every single cell in the body to conduct all of the normal cellular processes. Fructose, on the other hand, can only be metabolized in the liver. It can't be used by any other tissue or cell in the body. Glucose, because it can be used by every cell in the body, can be used up really quickly. We don't have the capability to store very much glucose. We can only store a small amount. This storage form of glucose is long chains of glucose called glycogen. Glycogen is stored in muscle cells and in the liver. The glycogen in muscle cells is primarily used for quick bursts of energy needs, like exercise. Glycogen in the liver is primarily used to regulate blood sugar to prevent it from going too low. Since we can't use fructose directly, it gets converted into free fatty acids and triglycerides for storage. Specifically, this is all done in the liver. This can ultimately lead to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease if fructose consumption is high. During times of fasting or exercise, when all of the glycogen has been used up, our bodies can switch to producing ketones from the breakdown of fat. These ketones are not produced in the presence of glycogen, glucose, or insulin. Let's talk about the digestion of fructose and glucose for a second. If we think about the digestive process like mass transit, we have large buses that can carry glucose all throughout the body, and we have little tiny buses that can carry fructose only to the liver. There was a study published in the Annals of Nutrition and Metabolism that looked at post-exercise recovery using glucose or fructose. What they found is that fructose was mildly assistive in restoring muscle glycogen for the first 2 hours, but most of the muscle recovery was done by glucose. After 4 hours, all of the fructose focused on restoring liver glycogen, but had no impact on muscle glycogen. So this indicates that fruit is really not a very helpful post-workout recovery food. So does this mean we should just avoid fruit at all costs? Well, not necessarily. I will say that fruit is absolutely not essential, and the fruits that we consume today are not at all what our early ancestors would have consumed. They are much higher in sugar, and they're much larger than centuries before. So, what are the best fruits that you can have on a low carb diet? Number one, avocado. Yes, it's a fruit. It's loaded with healthy fats, fiber, and tons of nutrients while being really low in carbohydrates. These carbohydrates are still fructose, so while this is an amazing addition to a low carb or keto diet, you may find that avocado decreases your ketone production a little bit. So even avocado isn't a carte blanche kind of food. Number two, blackberries, raspberries, strawberries, and blueberries. The overall carbohydrate content is still pretty low in these berries, and they're filled with fiber, which slows the digestion, making the blood sugar spike smaller and slower. For low carb eating, you'll still want to keep these to a small portion size, about a quarter of a cup. Strawberries are a little bit higher in water content, so you can have maybe a half a cup. Blueberries are the highest carb of these berries, so you'll want to keep those to a minimum. Number three, starfruit. This is a fun tropical fruit that you may not have tried. They're delicious and only have about 3 grams of net carbohydrates per 1 medium fruit. Number four, tomatoes. Fresh slices of tomato are really low in carbohydrates, but definitely use caution when it comes to cooked tomatoes as they become more concentrated as they cook down. Number five, olives. Another somewhat surprising food that's actually a fruit. Just like avocados, they're low in carbohydrates and high in healthy fats. And a few other quick options: coconut, rhubarb, lemon, cranberries, and small amounts of melon can also be enjoyed. So there you have the pros and cons of eating fruit.